I'm Darius McDermott from Chelsea Financial Services, and this morning in London and afternoon in Hong Kong, I'm delighted to be joined by Joanna Kwok, who is the co-manager on the JPM Asia Growth Fund. Good morning, good afternoon. There's been a restructure in the way that Asian and emerging markets money is run. Tell us about the change that happened in the team in 2015.
Sure. Well, three things, essentially. We had the merger between the former emerging markets team in London and the Pacific Regional Group in Asia, of which I was part of. And it was an exercise to basically combine and strengthen the resource and knowledge base that we had. So sector analysts who cover their stocks in their sector in depth across countries, and also country specialists who are portfolio managers themselves who've had a long history of running local money. And secondly, to help us communicate better, we have our own investment framework, sort of like a common language that we use to analyze over 1,300 stocks in the region, across countries, across sectors. And then thirdly, we wanted a strategy which is a high conviction, concentrated, all caps portfolio with a preference for quality growth companies in Asia. And so this is essentially fully making use of the resource base that we have. And this is how Asia Growth Strategy started. And we invest based on our conviction, not on the benchmark. It is a purely bottoms-up stock selection-driven strategy.
Well, having looked at the performance, it's clearly been a successful change, with the fund having returned almost twice as much as your average peer since that period. Tell us what's worked particularly well in the last 5 or so years.
Well, thank you. From a market perspective, I have to admit that the environment has been conducive for growth investors. Low interest rate and low growth environment has meant that investors are more willing to pay up for growth. But for the Asia Growth Strategy, we focus on quality as well as growth. And our focus on individual quality companies has helped us provide us with downside protection as well as upside participation. Now, from a fund perspective, stock selection has been the key contributor to the outperformance that we've had over the past few years. And I'm pleased with that because it shows that our process works. Our job to identify and invest in the quality growth companies that my team has identified. And this is rather than taking a country view or a sector view. Now, this has involved, large cap and mega cap names, but also mid cap names that our analysts have identified earlier than some of our peers.
And when we think of Asia and China and Taiwan specifically, obviously these are very heavily dominated tech stock markets. I've seen a figure recently suggesting that as much as sort of 70% of returns from China and Taiwanese stocks have come from that sector. Is that correct? And is that a theme that you see continuing for the years ahead?
You are correct. Technology names in China and Taiwan has done very well, similar to the US. So this is not purely just an Asian phenomenon. Well, it's certainly true that part of it is because some of these names are the pandemic beneficiary, right? And the most important thing is some of these trends that we have been seeing has already been happening before the pandemic and has been accelerated by the pandemic. But we believe that these structural trends will continue going forward. Now, some of these technology and internet names that we like in China and Taiwan, etc., we think that there's still a lot of potential for growth, areas of monetization to come. And on the valuation metrics that we look at, we believe that they will still give you a respectable mid-teens type of return annualized over the next 5 years. And what I believe also is that through this challenging period, the strong and big companies will emerge stronger and bigger as a result. So we're quite comfortable with some of our sizable positions in some of these names.
And looking through your fund, I see that you've got nearly a quarter of it in financials. That's not necessarily an area that I would imagine was an area for growth. Tell us about the financials, the type of financials you have and how they meet your growth criteria.
Well, the first point I'd made for financials is that the breadth of the sector, it's not purely just banks. There's insurance, there's exchanges, etc. However, you are right that in in the current low growth and low interest rate environment, the pressure on the profitability for banks globally is definitely there. But you've got to remember, here in Asia, 4.5 billion people live. There are still geographies where financial penetration remains very low. And through the combination of rising wealth effect, as well as smart use of technology, the demand for banking, insurance, wealth management products will only grow. And we are seeing these underlying structural trends happening in areas such as China and India insurance, retail-focused private sector banks in Southeast Asia, China and India, and then diversified financials such as wealth management and exchanges such as Hong Kong Exchange. Now, the most important thing is the quality of management for this sector is vitally important, and we pay a lot of attention to it.
That's really interesting. Thank you. What then is your sort of broad outlook for Asia for 2021? As you say, a huge population, a reasonable large number of companies, and sort of your stock universe is huge. What's your outlook? How do you see the year ahead?
Well, I think given 2020 has been an unusual year, the base for corporate earnings growth for 2021 has been made easier. Now, the valuation for Asian equities is now back to its long-term average. So it's neither cheap nor expensive. So we do need the earnings to come through. And US dollar, we believe, is on the expensive side and should weaken in the medium term. Now, historically, a weaker US dollar has been supportive for Asian equities. But the key is, for me, my job really isn't trying to second guess the market. My job is to focus on companies' fundamentals and identify the best opportunities here in Asia. And I believe that there are still many good structural investment opportunities, and investors should allocate part of their wealth here in Asia.
Thank you, Joanna. That's been really insightful. Thank you very much for your time. For more information on the JP Morgan Asia Growth Fund, please visit chelseafs.co.uk.